Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Head Forwards head-to-head, our second head-to-head. This time, .NET versus Java. We've got two exciting developers joining for the battle today. We've got Paul, who's going to be fighting for the .NET side, who's currently working as a Java developer, and we've got James fighting for the Java side, who's currently a .NET developer. So this is all very confusing. Just before we start, I'm going to give you a quick summary overview of Head Forwards. So we're a software outsourcing company. We're based in Cornwall. We've been around since 2011, and we currently employ just over 100 people. And most of those people are some sort of software delivery professionals, so mainly developers and testers and Scrum Masters, although we've got some more support and kind of operations people. We focus very much on bespoke software delivery and a delivery consultancy, so helping our clients get the most out of a team and working in the best way to deliver software for their end users. And we do that for a number of different clients around the world, but mainly based in the UK. We're based in Cornwall at the moment, and we're coming here. We're streaming live from the Fibre Hub, our head office, based in the middle of Cornwall. But we hire people. Our staff are around the whole country, so we're very remote friendly. If you like what you hear today and you fancy working for us, then keep an eye on our website. We've always got vacancies up there for all sorts of different jobs. So look out for that. So the session today, we're talking about .NET versus Java, and it's going to be slightly more, hopefully, collaborative than the first webinar that you listened to. Maybe not. We'll see if we can play nicely. So it's a bit of a confusing topic, .NET versus Java. One of them is generally a language. One of them is a framework. Although there's a lot of grey area between them. So I thought we could start with a bit of an introduction about the general frameworks and the ecosystem around them. James, do you want to start and give us a bit of a blurb about Java?
Yeah, sure. So Java is a sort of development platform that was originally introduced by Sun Microsystems in the mid-90s, and at the time it was released, it was kind of a big deal because one of the things it did that was quite different to the mainstream platforms at the time was to enable people to write in their language of choice and deploy their code to any underlying platform that supported what's called the Java Virtual Machine, the JVM. It was a spin-off, I think, of a consumer electronics project they were working on. And initially it was really just built for targeting web browsers and desktop development on the sort of main platforms of the day. The quick version of the way it works essentially is the source code compiles into an intermediate format rather than the native format for the platform you're working on. And that intermediate format is then shipped and executed at runtime by the virtual machine, which will convert it into the native format on the platform. And that's how it was able to target, for example, Windows or Macintosh or the platforms at the time. Today, it will target just about anything that you can think of. I think the other big deal at the time was that it was using garbage collection for memory management, which wasn't really that sort of common at the time. Most of the applications in the world were really working with things like C++, which were dealing with manual memory management, which was a big, kind of seen as quite a big problem. Today, lots of languages target the JVM. Most common one is the language also known as Java, as Dave alluded to. But there's also a whole bunch of other languages like Kotlin, Groovy, Clojure, and many more that aren't particularly mainstream. Maybe they're just sort of research projects. Worth saying it was originally closed source because at the time that was how things were mostly done, but mainly open source things by about the mid-2000s. So a little bit complicated, but most of this platform's now owned by Oracle, and there's also various reference implementations that are open source. And I think that probably covers the platform.
Cool. Thanks very much, James. Paul, how does that compare to the .NET world?
Okay, so what is .NET? It's a free open source developer platform, enabling you to create many types of applications. It's cross-platform, meaning it can run on most operating systems that CLR is implemented in, so Windows, Linux, Mac, mobile devices, Raspberry Pis. It supports a number of different programming languages: C#, Visual Basic, F#, C++. I think there's Python, Ada, Pascal probably. What it does for you, it provides a set of standard class libraries and API available to all .NET applications. The basic architecture, you write your code, whether that being C#, F#, VB.NET, pass it through a compiler, which creates a Microsoft intermediate language or intermediate code. Then that is run by the CLR, which uses a just-in-time compiler to produce native bytecode for the target machine you're running on. It was released in 2002 with the aim of bringing managed code to the Windows ecosystem. So for those of you who were around in those days in Windows programming, you would typically write in either VB Basic, Visual Basic, or C++. C++ had problems with bugs due to memory management. It's quite hard to develop in C++. So I think it brought the fact that it's, as same with Java, took a lot of influence from that. It's garbage collected. So the memory management side is taken away. It's continuously releasing, so we're at version 5. It's got quite a high release cadence, and it's always developed. It's always moving forward. So they're always releasing good new features each sort of instance. .NET. So I think I alluded to it's open source. Currently over 60,000 contributors. Has a large online community to help you, Stack Overflow, etc. I mentioned it was cross-platform. This wasn't always the case, even though the framework was written in or designed in architected in such a way that it could be cross-platform. Originally, cross-platform meant writing and deploying to different instances of Windows, different Windows versions, which was quite topical because a couple of days ago, David Fowler, who works for Microsoft, posted the same thing. He said, old Microsoft used cross-platform to mean different versions of Windows on different devices. But since a version of .NET Core, it's now fully cross-platform. You can target all those operating systems: Linux, Mac, Windows. That's pretty much it.
Thanks, Paul. They sound almost exactly the same. So I think we should probably drill into kind of the languages a little bit more. And I guess C# and Java are probably the most popular of those languages. But before I get one of you to talk, I did forget at the start to mention how people can ask questions. So at the top of the webinar, you should see a Q&A button. If you write any questions in there, then we will see them and we'll get to the questions at the end. And then also at the end, we'll open up a poll so you can vote to see who you think is the winner. So that's the kind of housekeeping that I forgot about. Finished off. James, do you want to talk to us a bit about kind of the core language, the Java core language?
Yeah, sure. So we've said that the platforms have quite a degree of similarity. Did we mention that Java came before C# and .NET? Was that clear?
I think it's
pretty
clear,
isn't it? So we'll talk now about Java, the language. It's because it's the most popular language on the JVM and the first one. So the sort of buzzwords, I guess, for describing the language are general purpose, high level, and also very strongly typed, and it's object orientated based on classes. I guess roughly the closest sort of ancestor to Java would have been C++ syntactically. So there's lots of squiggly braces, and we basically create objects based on a template called a class. Probably most people listening to this are quite familiar with all of this. It is strongly typed without getting into too much detail, rather than dynamically typed. And the kind of polymorphic behavior based on classes, using interfaces and abstract classes, and stuff that's all pretty familiar these days. We mentioned before that garbage collection is a feature of the language. That was something quite new. Again, it's kind of pretty normal these days. It's no big deal, but at the time it was released, it was something to talk about, really. There's an exception handling model. Now that is a little bit different to C#, I believe. In Java, there's the notion of checked and unchecked exceptions, which is made possible by the runtime, where the function signatures in Java will indicate any exceptions that the compiler can determine that the functions are able to correct. So I've fallen out my words there. The unchecked exceptions are the runtime's exceptions that the compiler can't be expected to catch. There's also a bunch of runtime capabilities via the JVM, which it's kind of a bit small talky. There's things like reflection, so code analysis can be done over a running program. Again, this was something that was a little bit different to what people were used to when it came out. Over time, the languages have evolved. There's been the addition of capabilities like generics programming, improvements in the concurrency model over the basic sort of threading and task model, and to some extent, some functional programming is also possible these days. Other than that, I'd say it's still 25 years in. I think Java's still one of the most widely used languages in the world.
Isn't it the most runs on most devices or something? Maybe?
There's a bunch of different ways to measure it, right? But some people will say, well, it's kind of almost legacy now, so that's why it's so So there's popular or widely used, or there's a lot of it out there, and it's not going to go away anytime soon.
So what is C#? What is C#? Well, it's a general purpose, high level programming language. It's static type, strongly type, object oriented, component oriented, garbage collected, supports functional programming through Lambda expressions, implements a common pattern to access data in the terms of link, known as link, supports asynchronous operations. It's the most popular .NET language, I would say, and was the 10th most loved programming, scripting and markup language as in 2022 Stack Overflow, what do I call it, survey. That's, I don't know what else to say, really. It's very similar to Java, I suppose.
That doesn't sound like the head-to-head the battle. So I guess where is
It's
it
got big release cadence, so they're always evolving. C# as a language. Modern C# is very different to like C#1. You had to introduce generics, lambdas. But it is sort of a lot more functional programming has come in. Functional programming style, I think, probably taken a lead from F#, and F#'s taken a lead from obviously functional programming community and languages, Pascal, I would imagine. We mentioned, so where is it different? So I think James mentioned in his thing, exception handling. We have the
nitpicking.
Yeah, we are being nitpicky. So I think Java, you define a function. What you have to define what exceptions a function will raise. Or not, you don't have to, but
You can do.
you can do, which I mean can be helpful. But we were having a chat. How often do you miss it when you're in C#? So you only handle the exceptions that you really want to think. So maybe that it forces you to implement code that might not be needed. And
Yeah, I think it can possibly look more attractive than it is with experience.
yeah, then you have, I suppose, if you're defining what exceptions are being raised, then any sort of upgrades, if you're introducing a new exception that affects all your clients, maybe, I don't know. Is there any difference in asynchronous programming? Because I suppose Microsoft in 2012 released task asynchronous programming pattern. I think that's what it's called, TAP. I think that's what it's called, which is and it introduced the async await pattern, which seems to have grown in popularity in other languages. That was quite a big release. I think it was .NET 4 released then. So does Java support that? So,
Not directly at a language level yet. It's fair to say both Java and C# have the basic primitives of threads and the things you then need to do to manage threads, sort of like locks and those kind of things, and it's never much fun. Java 8 introduced things like futures, which are very similar to promises, and in other languages, which is it's a step better. I think it's widely, async await seems to be the most popular pattern, really.
well, I suppose it simplifies the way you think about asynchronous code, right? I mean, obviously, it's got pitfalls as well that you need to be aware of, but it has made things a bit easier.
Yeah, that's not baked into Java's language yet. The Electronic Arts have got an async library that seems to be what most people use for that.
Okay.
But there are some other things coming that I'm not sure when they'll actually make it into the.
Is that Electronic Arts, the gaming company?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, cool. Thanks, guys. I think we should probably kind of speed up a bit. So let's start with perhaps let's try a quick fire round of questions. So I'm going to ask you to explain how your language supports building different types of kind of applications or bits of code, and just try and kind of give me a quick summary. So let's start with Paul this time. So .NET. How does it support building desktop applications?
I'd say that's Microsoft's strength, right? It originally was, I suppose, Microsoft originally built desktop, or the development stuff was targeted for Windows and building desktop apps on Windows. So they have a big history in it. Currently, you've got .NET MAUI, which allows you, I hope I pronounced that right, I suppose I have, lets you produce desktop and mobile apps using the same code. You've got Blazor hybrid apps, then you've got traditional WinUI, WPF, and Windows Forms. So got quite a few different ways. I'd say they're quite strong in building desktop applications. You've got quite a few.
All right, cool. James?
Java did have desktop applications originally, and I think it's become less popular apart from sort of niche areas where it makes no sense to do anything else. But it's mostly done, I believe, through the Swing framework these days, which is a kind of a higher level of abstraction and functionality on top of the old Java windowing toolkit. It's not something we've really done for quite some time. I can't remember the last desktop application. I
remember enjoying WPF though. I do remember that, and the MVVM pattern. I do remember enjoying, and XAML. I quite like that. I'm sure people will be spitting, but I quite liked it.
All right, cool. Well, I guess then you're more web applications. So that's what's the deal with C# and web applications?
.NET and web applications. So you can use they've got the concept of Blazor, which is allows you to write C# that back end and front end client. You've got ASP, traditional ASP.NET Core MVC apps. You've got Razor Pages. You can make web applications real time with Signal. But the main, I suppose, are Razor, Blazor, and Core.
Sounds like a liberating. Where's Java for web applications?
Where isn't it really? Over time, I mean, most of the sort of paradigms you expect are covered by one framework or another. So there was, for quite some time and still around, was the J2EE framework, which was kind of orientated towards, enterprisey development. If you hear bad things about Java development, it's probably to do with things of that time. Where .NET was pretty similar as well, but with lots of XML, very heavyweight sort of end tier. Largely geared towards perhaps introducing sort of enterprise big company developers to being able to use web technologies to do the things they already needed to do. Moving on a bit, there's a lot of support for things like the MVC pattern. Spring Boot and Spring MVC will pop up everywhere. There's frameworks like Struts, and then there's pretty much something for everywhere else in between, really. I think there's a lot of very high performance Java available, which surprises some people. So I think it's you can do either enterprise or quite modern web development using it. Yeah, not everyone's first choice, I know, but
Okay. What about mobile development?
So mobile development, I think, is catered for by .NET MAUI that I mentioned, which it took its lead from Xamarin. And Xamarin I think they were the original architects of the Mono platform, which was bringing .NET to Linux. And then I think they got taken over by Microsoft, or they amalgamated with Microsoft, and then that drove the cross-platform, the .NET Core, and making .NET truly cross-platform. So you can write in C#, and you should be able to target any mobile device using Xamarin stroke .NET, .NET MAUI. I think it uses the XAML syntax. So I think you could probably write C# as well. XAML, which is like an XML-based markup language.
It's writable speaking. James, what's the mobile development story with Java?
Well, traditionally it's very strong because Java being the native platform for Android. Past few years, another JVM language called Kotlin has become apparently the preferred choice, which is JetBrains developed Kotlin. But it runs on the JVM, it's just not Java, just a derivation of really. It's a little bit more tricky to target iOS, which only, using Swift or Objective-C is probably still the preferred choice. But if you need to do it, there are tools and platforms you can use in order to sort of cross-compile quite successfully. Probably not as slick as doing it natively, but you can do it. Yeah, people do. I think Codename 1 is it's popular at the moment.
Okay. Interesting. I guess then what we left behind? Game development, I suppose.
Yeah. So Microsoft provide, I think, Unity for game development, which is cross-platform. So you can write games for Windows, Mac, Linux, Android, iOS, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo. I think they've recently just released the Microsoft Game Development Kit, GDK, which I believe only targets Xbox at the moment. So, yeah, they're definitely in the game space. I think they're quite big players in that market.
Yeah, I think they've been really pushing into that. So I know that for Java, there's a lot of online games. I don't know much about it, to be honest, but I know there's a lot of them.
Right.
But Minecraft being that's probably the sort of famous one.
Okay.
So, I mean, by volume of actual games that are out there that are in Java, I think it's a proven platform. Yeah. I'm expert in that. So
I guess let's all wait until the Oracle games console comes out and then get Java.
Well, Electronics Arts have done that task thing, so I must use it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What about what we not covered? Developer experience, I suppose. Where do we sit on that?
So I suppose Microsoft is strong in that, just by view of the fact of having Visual Studio IDE.
You have used it, right?
Oh, it's come on loads, and then you've got Rider, I suppose, and you've got, and then you can just use code or any other sort of editor with, or you can use Vim or Vi or Emacs.
Yeah, I mean, JetBrains were providing the IDEs for both platforms,
Yeah.
I think, and to some extent, the success of the platforms has been because of those IDEs, just due to the massive amount of class frameworks that you need to be able to have support with things like IntelliSense, and very, very difficult to program in either environment without that.
But with the case of test-driven development, do you feel that IDEs aren't as important as they may have once been? We don't spend as much time in the debugger, I don't think, when you're trying to fix TDD.
Yeah.
One would hope
certainly that's debug support. Yeah.
So.
Okay. So it feels like we're coming to a natural end point. have we missed anything? Is there any kind of specific areas that either one of you want to kind of highlight before we put it out to the audience to vote on who wins?
I suppose Microsoft originally, the .NET framework originally, traditionally, if you we're having this conversation 15 years ago, then Microsoft was only really for Microsoft estates. You mentioned Mono, and .NET Core has opened that up, I would say, whereas Java always took a lead on that, maybe in the cross-platform, I think.
Yeah, well, I think the kind of contribution to the open source movement as well. Java was kind of leading the way between the two platforms, at least for quite some time. But then some interesting things have happened in
definitely
that world as well.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think one could exist without the other. In a way, maybe they pushed each other on. Maybe. Healthy competition.
All right, cool. Well, thank you very much, guys. I think that's been a good kind of walk through of history and up to the kind of the current day. And there's clearly a lot of similarities between the two. And I'm glad I'm sitting here and not watching. Because now we're going to push it over to everyone who's watching. So you should see in a moment a poll appear on your screen with two choices. If you could vote for which one you prefer, which one you think is winning. So that's either .NET or Java, or I guess you could do Paul or James, whichever one you prefer.
Come down to charisma.
There's no Dave option.
Charisma or language.
So if you could put vote on that would be great. And if you've got any questions, then if you put them into the Q&A, that would be also good. Just seeing what the poll looks like at the moment. Let's see.
Can you see the poll?
No,
I can see the poll.
It's not. We need a drum roll, though, doesn't it?
I'm not a drummer, clearly. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple more minutes to complete the poll. It's only just popped up on my screen. So I guess while we're waiting for that poll to come in, what's your go-to? What would you pick up if you were going to build something new now? How do you decide what you're going to use?
So in personal products, probably go with .NET, but I don't know why. I don't think it's probably familiarity. Even though I'm employed as a Java programmer, but I honestly think
For now.
Yeah, I honestly think you choose the tools for what job you're doing and in which team you're in. If the team's got Java experience and they want to use Java, use Java. Just use what makes you feel happy, I suppose.
Cool. We have had a question come in. Which do you think is easier to learn?
I suppose they both have quite a big entry point.
Depends where you're coming from as well.
Yeah, I think .NET, I mentioned that they're taking a lot of influence from the functional programming. So they had this new concept of minimal APIs. They're trying to take a lead from the sort of Python.
Oh, yeah.
Node.
It looks like Express.
Yeah, it just looks like Node or Python, because I think that there's been there's been some sort of chat that .NET is very hard to get your head into. You can't just write something and it works straight away. You have to know a lot about the framework. So they're addressing that. So .NET might be difficult to get in. I don't know. Java has, with the Spring frameworks, hides a lot of things away.
Yeah.
So
I think that this is when you're learning something like this, even if somebody can produce boilerplate, it doesn't mean you don't need to understand what's going on in the background. So I don't think there's a great deal of difference in terms of wrap up and how to learn either of those languages.
I suppose it depends what you're writing as well. If you're going to write for cloud, sometimes you don't need all that infrastructure stuff. So maybe you don't need such a deep knowledge as you traditionally did if you were hosting your own sort of website and or running a desktop app, deploying services, etc. Does that take that away? But to answer the question, they're both probably, they're not as easy to pick up as, say, no JavaScript or Python, would you say? I think there's a lot.
There's an awful lot of keywords in C# more. I think it's a bit more keyword heavy these days, when different sort of program paradigms have been introduced, and that I think could be quite off-putting.
And maybe .NET has the Microsoft way as well. Java's maybe a bit more open to different things. Historically, Microsoft, you do things the Microsoft way.
Okay, right, we're getting a few more questions. Brace yourselves. We've got one. Developers often claim that Java runs slower than other programming languages because of its cross-platform capability. Do we think that's still accurate?
Slower than what? Slower than a native. So C++, I think traditionally it probably it was a tradition. I think they made both communities have made great steps to improve performance. That was always leveled, wasn't it? I remember .NET at the start was always leveled. It'd be a lot quicker because it's an interpreted language. But now with the just-in-time compiler, I think you mentioned in the chat before that that's become very good at optimizing stuff.
Yeah, the compiler designs are able to do amazing stuff with JIT compilers and things these days. So there's there are cases where it's kind of almost counterintuitively the interpreted runtime environments can do things faster than the native.
But I mean, really, so if you're looking at performance and you feel that an interpreted language isn't the right choice, there are other languages out there that might be, or other solutions that might be better to look at, right? I don't think it's a blocker nowadays that might have been leveled at it in the past, whether that was true or not.
I mean, from a developer point of view, if you're using you'll notice the startup time and the difference between something like Java and Rust if you just type Go. But then in the real world, most programs don't run for short periods of time. They start at once and run a long period.
I think in a non-deterministic thing of the garbage collector also was something people would rally against, saying that slows things down because garbage interferes time.
But I mean, computers are so fast these days. I mean, most applications just don't have those performance concerns. It's just.
We've got a question about whether we think so. Java's always been open source, and Java's always been thought about as being more. As long as I can remember, it's been open source, and .NET's traditionally been kind of Microsoft's thing. So is there there's kind of a push towards being more open source? Do you think that kind of pushes people towards Java more, or
.NET is more or less completely open source, isn't it?
I think they've done a great job of turning the ship around in that. The person who answered that question is totally right. Microsoft were quite inward facing and quite conservative, and it was in the Microsoft estate. And I think since .NET Core and they've gone open source, I think they've embraced the open source community quite well. Does that push people towards Java? Maybe. I don't know how you'd quantify that.
Gut feel, I guess.
Yeah, gut feel. I mean, maybe it does. Maybe it does put people off. But I think, like I say, I can only say that they've tried to embrace open source, and I think they've done a good job of that.
I think there's been some kind of slight teething problems where some of the projects that were quite popular open source .NET things before Microsoft really took that on board could naturally be sort of absorbed into the core framework. Maybe a little bit of tension there, but there's
is there a bigger open source community in Java and more of a, so does that, so to answer your question, so maybe that helps Java, and maybe traditionally Microsoft has always been led by Microsoft, so what, but I think that's changing, but yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I think that traditionally a lot of the popular kind of open source projects on .NET were essentially ports from Java.
Java, yeah.
Usually starting with the word N and
Yeah.
hibernate.
Yeah.
Hibernate.
Agreed.
All right, cool. So we're 40-ish minutes in. I think we're kind of getting to the point where we're running out of time. The poll is completed now. The results are, it's a win for .NET. 88% of the votes went to the .NET framework. So
I
I'm
knew
not
it would be.
surprised it's that high.
I told you it was charisma.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's that high, to be honest.
well, it's a as Lindsay says, it's a landslide. So
Okay.
Glad I work in .NET as my day job.
okay, well, thank you very much to both of you. Congratulations, Paul. And
What do I win?
a mystery prize.
Okay, brilliant.
So yeah, thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who's listening, spent their time at lunchtime listening to us whisper on about .NET and Java. And thank you to all the people in the future that are going to be listening to this, spending their time listening to this on the YouTube channel. If you liked what you heard, or if you hated what you heard, but you want to see whether we could do a better job somewhere else, this is the second in a series of different head-to-head webinars that we've got planned. So keep an eye out on our LinkedIn and Instagram channels for when the next one's coming up. Thank you very much.